Welcome to Movie Speeching. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take good care. Flight World War II is the name of the movie. Please like and subscribe for every update. It was a beautiful, sunny day when airliner IA-42, carrying pilots William and Daniel, began its flight from Dallas to London. The flight starts off smoothly, but after a few moments the flight instruments start behaving strangely. William called ground control for help, but was told to continue as the skies were clear. The pilots felt a brief moment of relief as a huge storm suddenly appeared before them, but ground control was convinced that the storm had not existed 5 seconds earlier. With no choice but to fly in a straight line, William informs the passengers that they will encounter turbulence. When the pilot flies through a heavy storm, the plane begins to shake like crazy and glow suspiciously during the flight. The plane soon stabilized and was flying normally again, but within seconds the pilots were shocked to find the sky completely dark, as if night had suddenly set in. William tells the passengers that this is a funny phenomenon that happens when flying over the Bermuda Triangle and uses this as an excuse to calm them down. But passengers still worry when they find that their cell phones and computers can't connect. Most of the flight instruments in the cabin are also out of order, and William is unable to establish contact with ground control. Since the radar is still working, the pilot believes it is sufficient to continue flying for the time being. Meanwhile, flight attendants hand out snacks and tell everyone not to worry. This is normal turbulence. Cameron speaks with two men who happen to be historians and learns that they are traveling to London to analyze recently discovered war artifacts. Some old people write down everything that happens to them in a notebook. After a while, no other aircraft could be detected on the pilot's radar. This is very worrying and could mean that the storm has thrown you off course. William decides to fly the plane in a loop to look for someone, but he has no idea where he is when he descends. Suddenly something appears on the radar, and at first you think it's a storm, but the truth is more sinister. It's a group of fighter jets bombing the city as if it were at war. Passengers immediately panic as they see buildings exploding beneath the plane and the area being shelled, but historians can't help but notice something strange. The pilots had no idea what to do, but before they could discuss their options, they suddenly saw several fighter planes surrounding them. These fighter jets are ready to fire, but thanks to the radar, the pilots manage to fly the plane quickly and fly high in the sky. The passengers become nervous and demand an explanation, so Cameron does his best to calm them down. Michael was so rude and aggressive that he even dared to grab Cameron, but he was persuaded to behave after another flight attendant threatened to tie him up. William continued to try and contact ground control, but was unsuccessful, so he decided to descend again to learn their location. Daniel is initially wary of being attacked again, but William points out that they are running out of fuel and need to find a solution quickly. At that moment, the historians convince Cameron that he might know something and go with them to meet the pilot, not knowing that Michael is following them and listening to their conversation. Persuade. Historians tell the pilots that the fighter plane they have just seen has not been manufactured since 1945 and belonged to the Luftwaffe, the Nazi Air Force. William does not take them seriously and tries to kick them out, but historians suspect that the plane has lost all signals, so William decides to give them a chance. Historians believe the plane dates back to 1940 and is currently in the midst of World War II. If an anomaly brings them here, we have to find another plane that can send them back. The idea of time travel still seemed stupid to William, so he asks them to return to their seats and tell no one about their crazy theory. Michael also rushes back to his seat before they see him and tries to grab them again as Cameron passes by, but Cameron becomes too intimidating and won't let him go. After she leaves, Michael begins to closely observe the historians behind him. They use books and calculations to figure out what's going on. The pilot then descends again to search for a radio signal. Fortunately, this time they were successful and made contact with a British soldier named Nigel. He believes they are spies interfering with him, as it is impossible to receive radio signals from aircraft flying at such high altitudes. The pilots beg for help, and when Nigel continues to be confused, William asks for the date, causing Nigel to confirm the historian's theory. They are on June 17, 1940. They try to convince Nigel of their situation, which seems incredibly crazy. Fortunately, the historians return to the cabin with more information and were able to speak to Nigel. They calculate the approximate location and state that they have passed where the British ship Lancastria sank, shocking Nigel, who believes the ship is still active. Nigel decides to check with his boss if the story about the ship is true and promises to call him back. While the historians are away, Michael takes their books and ends up piecing two and two together. He angrily got up and told the other passengers what was happening. He says he can use the information in this book to kill Hitler and stop World War II. Most of the passengers did not take him seriously and made fun of him, but a few people believed him and agreed to help hijack the cockpit. Fortunately, there were also 2 American soldiers on board the plane, who quickly intervened and explained that cockpit hijacking is considered terrorism, regardless of their intentions. This started a fight in which the flight attendants also joined in, and after several blows, the soldiers managed to subdue the hijackers and send them back to their seats before threatening everyone else. A few minutes later, Nigel contacts them and confirms that their information about Lancastria was correct. In fact, their information helped save many people, so Nigel now trusts them. But he also mentions some missions that were conducted differently than what historians know about the war. This means that the missions are set in different versions of the past. Nigel intends to help the plane land, but first he needs to know its exact location. Unfortunately, William and historians can only make rough estimates. Daniel turns on his lights so that the British soldiers can see him, but the Germans eavesdrop on their conversation and give them orders. They are quickly surrounded by a group of fighters and are immediately fired upon. After turning off the lights, William uses his piloting experience to avoid all the bullets as all the passengers scream in fear. When the ball becomes too heavy, he suddenly drops the plane and, after falling for a few seconds, picks it up again just before it hits the ground. The Germans also pursued him, but their older planes did not have the control they had before, and most crashed to the ground. Unfortunately, 2 planes survived and shot through the cabin, injuring Daniel and punching several holes in the plane. When William manages to get them out of enemy range, the flight attendants quickly plug the hole and use their first aid knowledge to repair Daniel. William is worried about running out of fuel and having his landing wheels damaged by gunfire. Unable to contact Nigel, Cameron convinces the passengers to cooperate. Meanwhile, a superior tells Nigel that if he does not hear from his mysterious friends soon, he will blow up the plane before it falls into the hands of the Germans. After leaving Daniel in the cockpit, William goes to the passengers and finally confesses his truth. He explained that they are doing their best to land the plane, but the landing wheels were damaged in a recent attack and will need help with repairs. Teresa reveals herself to be an engineer and agrees to accompany him. Hearing this, Hector, a handyman, also volunteers. William brings his new team to the back of the plane, and luckily Teresa is able to spot the problem quickly, so they begin to solve it with Hector's help. After I finished, I managed to open the door, but something got stuck and the wheels wouldn't come down. William volunteers to go down, but Hector says he will do it for him, since he needs a captain to fly the plane. Hector carefully climbs onto the landing wheel and solves the problem with a hammer. The bike started moving quickly and Hector had to hold on tight to keep from falling, but luckily the bike made it back without anyone getting hurt. William rushes back to the cabin and flies low to pick up a radio signal again with Daniel's help. They contact Nigel and tell him he only has 80 minutes of fuel left and they need to land as soon as possible. Their conversation is interrupted when 2 German planes return and attack them. This time he throws a rocket, but the explosion comes too close and destroys all the plane's windows. As the passengers panic, William uses radar to monitor the enemy and executes a crazy plan to crash German planes into each other. Then historians have an idea. You need to remove the plane's radar and send it to Nigel so he can use the radar to guide you to safety. It makes no sense that they don't have this technology yet, so perhaps the plane was sent back in time to solve this problem. At that moment, the rocket collided with the turbine and the plane began to fall at great speed. After several failed attempts, the pilots were able to get the radar working again, contact Nigel, and agree on where to drop it. It was then discovered that the missile was from Britain, but Nigel instructed his superiors to stop firing and pick up radar. On the plane, everyone works together to make the package. The old man reveals he bought some toy parachutes for his grandkids and donates them to the cause, and a few passengers hand in their USB batteries. Then they wrap the radar up in a bunch of clothes and a bag and connect it to the parachutes. As soon as they reach the right spot, they throw it off the plane and immediately tell Nigel about it. But unfortunately, the Nazis pick up this conversation too and arrive first. A German soldier begins climbing a tree to reach the package, but at that moment, a few soldiers from the British Army arrive and a gunfight ensues. Fortunately, the British had the upper hand and were able to kill the Germans one by one and recover their cargo. The Nazis also sent more planes towards William's plane, this time firing into the side of the plane, creating a large hole through which several people fell. The plane shakes quite a bit, but William does something crazy again to save the plane from danger. Once Nigel obtains the radar, he sets it up and guides William to fly in the right direction, even though the Nazis are catching up to him. As they are about to open fire, a British plane sent by Nigel arrives and fires back, allowing the airliner to continue flying safely. Suddenly, Nigel spots a large shadow on his radar that doesn't look like a plane, and as the plane approaches, he realizes that it is the exact same storm that brought them this time. This is a dangerous job, but they are running out of fuel anyway, so William decides to fly in hopes of sending them back to the prison. After saying goodbye to Nigel and telling the passengers to wait for them, William and Daniel board the plane to Restorm, and after much shaking, they are glad to finally be back in the prison. They appeared to be flying over Berlin, and luckily ground control contacted them quickly and provided them with an empty runway to land. The pilot pushed the plane to its limits and managed to land it safely. The passengers, relieved to be home, quickly get off the plane. When William leaves the cabin, he finds the old man still sitting in his seat, writing in his notebook, and there is a map labeled the radar system that saved Europe, which shows the route they took. They were similar. When the old man closes the book, we learn that his name is Nigel. So this is the man who saved them in 1940. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.